Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thanks so much for being here. I have a really fascinating interview for you this week. I feel like I always say interesting, so we're going to go with fascinating this week. And I am interviewing Lenn Hann. Now, Lenn Hann, he is an inventor. We're going to talk a lot about some of the inventions he's created, cat toys, medical devices. But the big one we're going to talk about is his running shoe. He spent almost 20 years, actually maybe more than 20 years, developing this shoe. It's good for, runners and also for people who are having stability and pain issues. It's a really cool looking shoe. It's got a hinge to it. It's got an ellipse that goes up and down. I'm going to link to the page in the info section here so you can see what it looks like. It is on Kickstarter at the moment as well. Good for, like I was mentioning, and he'll mention whether you're, a professional runner or just somebody who wants to, walk through the mall without some pain. It's a cool product. The reason I had him on is just you can hear the passion behind what it took to create this product. 20 years in the making. It started with him actually running barefoot on a moving walkway in the Chicago airport, and just liking the dynamics behind that and trying to get it on a shoe. He's going to talk about that. That's the reason I had him on. It's not a big commercial for the shoe, although it does seem like a pretty cool shoe and something that I would urge you to check out. But I had him on because I think it's just cool to hear the perspective of an inventor and why they, create things that no one knew was needed, and then they find that need and they go out and they be creative and create an entire new product. So really cool. You can hear the passion behind all of this with Lenn and just the motivation that he had to create this to better running and better comfort. You're going to learn more about shoes than you ever thought that you needed to know, but I will promise you that it is a fascinating conversation. Fascinating to hear about this. He certainly didn't disappoint when it comes to just telling us about the shoe world, the inventor world, and just a very interesting person. So without further ado, here is my interview with Lenn Hann. I am here today with Lenn Hann. Lenn, how are you?
I am good. I'm very good, Jackson. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for joining me. So obviously we're going to talk all about hand shoes and what all that entails. But before that, tell us just a little bit about yourself outside of the shoe endeavor. I know that it's something you've been working on for a while, but when you're not working on shoes, what are some of the other things that you do?
Well, I'm an engineer. Back at the dawn of my career, I did telephony and worked in other kinds of, computer-oriented jobs. I've done medical work. And then, when we moved here to Indiana, I'm in Northwest Indiana now.
Oh, wow.
Moved from Chicago West suburbs to Valparaiso. And my wife's best friend lives in Fort Wayne, by the way.
Very cool.
So, yeah. So, other than the work-related stuff, I'm a big adventure sports guy, and I got my pilot's license in high school. In college, I started skiing, and then quickly progressed into ski racing, downhill ski racing, and then I did that for 12 years, getting to a fairly high level ultimately. Just after college, I started skydiving and did that for 20 years and have just under 1,000 jumps. And after that, my brother graduated college and moved to Florida. And so, of course, he started scuba diving, and I did too. And we're both divers, active divers. We just took my 3 kids to Key Largo this summer. And got them certified.
That's awesome.
And they're 14, 11, and 11. It turns out you can get certified when you're 10. So they really loved that. And in the midst of all these other things, I did about 6 years of fairly active rock climbing. I've inline skated. I bike raced. I motorcycle road raced for a while. I've always had sports cars and have been involved in that. So, kind of a general adventure sports fan. And the way that I get that, adrenaline kick now, trying to, live on the very edge is I have the 3 kids.
3 kids, yeah.
The dad of the 3 kids. So
they might be more of an adventure sport than anything else you've done.
I know. Everything else I've done up till now, has trained me to do that.
Yeah. Well, I don't.
The 3 kids.
I don't want to gloss over that. You are from Indiana. I think that based on what you were saying, you realize I'm in Indiana too.
Yes.
Yeah. I was checking out your website, and you talked about being an inventor. So what other things had you invented?
Okay, so boy, now we're getting into stuff that I've actually never gotten into in any podcast or discussion.
Well, that's the idea, huh?
Yeah. I started. So back when I was in the computer industry, the very first thing was I started with earmuffs that had stereo built in. That had headphones built in to a winter warming your ears type earmuff. Mm-hmm. And I sold that idea to Kloss, the stereo company, and it never really went anywhere, but I made a little bit of money on that. After that, I, believe it or not, got into working in food cooling. Something came up about, the spoilage that you can get even by putting food into it. My wife's a dietitian, so we have those conversations about the food industry, and I got into food cooling, and so I came up with some passive cooling devices that I actually licensed and did. They were headed to market, but it turned out that if you put another pot, if you put it in a middle shelf and put another pot right on top of it, it stopped the airflow enough that it wouldn't cool in the legally mandated time. And we never took it to market. Another thing I did, believe it or not, was a magnetically driven cat toy. Look, it was a pendulum. It was a pendulum with like a little mouse on it and 3 magnets in the base on a scratch pad base. And when you batted at the mouse, it would bounce energetically and jump around and, freak the cat out, and the cat would attack it and come back, time after time to play with it. And I licensed that to a company, and it did fairly well for a while. It floated my boat. And then the shoe, I started working on the shoe. Holy cow, back in college, okay, I was bread knifing shoes apart, running shoes. I was a recreational runner all those years. And I was bread knifing shoes apart, when I thought they were particularly interesting, just to see, well, what's going on with this one? Why is it working? Why is it not working? And at the same time, I was, working on running my first full marathon in those years, and never quite getting there because of injury or something. But in '95, I finally finished my first full marathon, and that kind of kicked off my footwear career.
Yeah,
was, achieving that milestone.
Right.
And one guy sent me a paper that he wrote. When the cat toy came out, he sent me a paper he wrote. He had gotten the patent for the cat toy and done his master's thesis on the psychology of a cat toy inventor. And he never interviewed me or anything. It was just the toy and the patent, and he just went from there. He just speculated on what kind of a person would do this, and
yeah,
it was pretty funny.
Was he very close?
Oh, he was spot on. He was totally spot on. I sent him an autographed copy, and said, hey, grade A, you did an awesome job here. It was fun. And then the old saying that necessity is the mother of invention, that you invent things that you would use yourself, that's the truest thing for me.
Right. Yeah. So I do want to talk about your shoes. and just the story behind creating it. You have a really fascinating story on your website. If you could just share just a little bit of that story of how this idea sparked and how you decided to make a shoe that's quite a bit different than any other running shoe that's on the market.
How much time do we have? It's an in-depth story, or it can be. I mentioned, that I completed my first marathon in '95, finally. And the way that I did that was to join CARA, Chicago Area Runners Association, who has a summer marathon training program that is exactly and precisely the same every time you do it. And using that methodology, that program, I've done 21 marathons at this point in my life, 16 Chicagos, and they were all, during the CARA timeframe. I was a pace group leader for them, which means that I led the 10-minute pace group, a mid-pack runner, mid-pack speed. I led the 10-minute pace group for 17 years. And so I've taught hundreds of runners how to run marathons, including my wife, who was in my pace group one year. And here we are, 3 kids later, and a bunch of years. It worked out. Running's been good to me.
Yeah,
it has. And so at the same time that I was, had completed the first marathon, and then I was 95, 96, I completed the second marathon. I'm also traveling a lot. I'm traveling a lot for work. And remember, I had the pilot's license from high school. I was an engineer. I was ski racing and skydiving, all of those things, a bunch, rock climbing. So I'm kind of a gear sport fan, a gear sport, aficionado, if you want to put it that way. And so I'm traveling for work, and O'Hare Airport on the lower level still has, I think there's 5 segments of moving walkway going both ways for the parking level, to get to the elevators, to go to parking, if you parked in the parking there. And at that time, they're solid metal tread now, like an escalator. But at that time, they were, it was a black rubber moving walkway made by Dunlop. And one time I stopped and talked with the guys. They had the equipment bay open. And I got down in there and said, hey, can I take pictures? And I took some pictures of everything. And they showed me how that roller with that 20-foot belt, something like that, was tensioned to 3,000 pounds. Okay. So like, a small SUV holding the belt tight, right? That kind of weight, that kind of tension. And the sides of the belt was only, the belt was less, like 3/4 of an inch thick. And the sides of it rolled on rollers, ball bearing rollers, but the middle of it, there was nothing supporting you when you walked on it other than the belt tension. And so I would walk on this belt and just notice this most amazing sort of floaty, sort of springy, like a really taut little trampoline feeling. And I would think, wow, that's really unique. That's, unique in the real sense of the word. Like I've never felt anything like this anywhere else. You stand on a regular trampoline and they move a lot. They're designed to throw you 10 feet in the air, 15 feet in the air, right? This thing, I don't think you could jump very high on it, but every now and then I would put down my bags and stuff and I would run on it. It's like, wow, that's kind of cool. Well, one weekend in, I think, August in '97, I put on my running clothes and drove up to O'Hare with a cooler of Gatorade and stuff. And I went down, I parked, and I went to the parking level, and I was going to run on those belts. I was going to go do a run. And that evening, just by chance, all the belts were stopped, which is fine, and the guys were working on them in the equipment closet. And I said, hey, do you care if I run on these belts. And this was before 9/11. And they're like, yeah, sure, bud, whatever floats your boat, rock your socks off. And so I put down the Gatorade and my towel, and I took my shoes off and started running. And I had the laps, I had the distance measured out, and I knew how many laps would equate to a half marathon. And about an hour into it, okay, I'm running along barefoot on these belts, and it is glorious. It felt, I'm running all the way out, all the way back, all the way out, all the way back. It felt like the whole thing was kind of going downhill every direction, that I ran. And I felt light and fast, and, good leg turnover speed and everything you want as a runner. And that's at the 1 hour mark. And as I closed in on the half marathon, I'm looking at my watch and I'm like, wow, normally a half marathon for me would have been about, 2:20 to 2:30 out on a road race. And I'm coming in just barely over 2. And I'm like, this thing rocks, I wish I had one of these 26 miles long, that I could go do a marathon on. And I finished just over 2, and I'm wiping the sweat off and drinking a little Gatorade, and it just kind of hit me all at once. It's like, whatever this is going on here, I got to figure it out, and I got to put it into a shoe. I've got to put this into a shoe, because this was wonderful. And that was 97, and the first shoe that I actually ran a full marathon in was 2002. So 5 years later.
So, yeah, I mean, you're talking about this story in 1997, and that your Kickstarter is starting here relatively soon. So what caused you, I guess, to stay this committed to this for the last 20 plus years to finally get it to market?
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good question. My brother, my license plate in Illinois said tenacious, I don't know. It's, and why? Well, okay. So let's look at that. So I ran on this belt in 97, and I had been, at the same time, I had been writing off to biomechanics experts and asking for papers that they had written, that I had seen the synopsis of these papers. Could you send me this paper and that one? And, I'm sending off checks and money and self-addressed stamped envelopes and getting these papers back. And sometimes these guys, these researchers are wonderful people. And, the guy would say, oh, if you wanted this paper, well, here's 4 others that are related to it, enjoy these 2, and I was amassing a pretty comprehensive collection of biomechanical research on what the body needs to do to run efficiently. Okay. And I'm also at the same time talking, when I would go to races, I'm talking to the front runners about their shoes. What do they like? What don't they like? I'm talking to orthopedic surgeons, what kinds of injuries do you see with running shoes, and how do you think we could correct them? And physical therapists and chiropractors and people like that. And so I've got all this data. I'm starting to form some big impressions, and I've got that experience with that belt that was like the shining star, the leading me, my North Star leading me onward. Okay. And I started working on materials research. Like, is there a foam that would do this the way I want it to? Turns out not really. I had shoes made out of halves of racquetballs. Okay. Just to see, would that kind of a structure give me the resilience I'm looking for? And it worked okay. I had a shoe that I ran 10K on. And then we can't see this on the podcast, but here's a shoe that has a ginormous air unit glued to it. That a friend of mine who was a parachute rigger and I designed this, and it's got an inner tube, a bicycle inner tube running through it, and you can inflate it to about 16 pounds, and it runs pretty well. I did a couple 10Ks with
so it's square on the bottom. I guess my question to that would be, were you kind of just looking at it and seeing whether this technology would work, or did you think if that worked that you were going to create a square shoe?
Oh, no, no, no. That's just the prototype. I would
Yeah.
have to make a shoe-shaped shoe,
Yeah.
obviously. But, that was the easiest way to be able to encapsulate the air as a
Right.
prototype thing. And the only problem with it was heavy,
Uh-huh.
but the resiliency was good. I'm trying to capture that feeling of that belt. Okay.
Right.
Well, then I got, I decided to bite the bullet. I knew it was coming. And I started looking at composite structures, glass and carbon fiber kinds of things.
Mhm.
And I had prototypes that looked like a lasagna noodle, like if you stack lasagna noodles on top of each other and
Mhm.
squeeze them, they're actually pretty springy. Okay.
Mhm.
I think that's maybe where I got that observation. So I was trying to make that out of composite, and that didn't really work out, although it pointed in a direction. And so finally, I ended up carving and sanding shapes, mandrels, forms out of wood, and then covering them with release tape. And I got pre-impregnated glass epoxy cloth and wrapped that around the forms, and then wrapped that with shrink tape and cooked it in my oven like it was a pan of cookies. And what I have here is an ellipse, like if you were to take a cylinder, like a cardboard tube, maybe out of the paper towel roll, and flatten it, okay, all the way till it's flat, and then let it spring open. It's
Mhm.
kind of an ellipse shape, okay, a flattened circle. And it turns out that, and I'm skipping through some time frames here. My first ones were smaller. They didn't really give me what I wanted. But then I had some conversation. Remember, I'm a ski racer. I had some conversation with some ski racing engineers at a trade show about how do you get good edge hold, good torsional stability? How do you get good edge hold on a racing ski on a fast, icy race course? And you see these guys in their element, and you ask them that kind of a question. We were there for 2 hours, okay, filling me in on all the details about how you build a composite racing ski so that it's got that good torsional stability. Well, that was, I connected those dots for myself. That was the key to being able to build these longer and taller and still have really good lateral stability, okay, on the suspension element. And so now what I've done is something you can't do with foam. So if you imagine, like the foam that you use in a running shoe, the easy way to imagine that, if you're not a running shoe engineer or a foam engineer, material scientist, imagine a cube of Jell-O on a plate. Okay, so you've got your cube of Jell-O on a plate, and everyone's done that. And you turn it, and it wobbles, And here's the interesting thing: if you try to press on it, okay, if you try to press on that cube of Jell-O, what you discover is it wants to go everywhere. It wants to fold and tilt every possible direction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, imagine trying to stand on that. Okay, it wouldn't work. It would be an unpleasant experience. Well, that's what happens in your foam running shoes, especially the really thick ones. And that's why the really thick foam running shoes have such a wide sole. They're trying to stabilize your ankle, okay, with that really wide sole, and it works, okay. It's a whole different flavor of running shoe, and I like them. I like the Hoka shoes and the various versions that are similar to that. But, okay, our shoe. So what we've got here with this folded ellipse, this flattened circle, this ellipse composite, that rings like a bell, okay? You can't squeeze it with your fingers, but if you stand on it vertically, it moves very easily, very fluidly, You can bounce on it, and it's kind of fun. Okay?
And that same hard thing is in your shoe, correct?
It is.
The best you can describe what you're showing. You don't want me to describe it because you're not going to like whatever terminology I have.
Sure. No, I understand that, and it's like trying to describe something no one's ever seen before, really.
Right.
What we have here looks like a normal running shoe, except that there's this, roughly 4-inch long ellipse in the heel that's about an inch high, and there's a roughly a little bit more, 4.25 inch long ellipse in the forefoot that's about, I don't know, 5/8 of an inch high. Okay. And the forefoot suspension, okay, has a hinge. Look at that. The whole shoe lifts off of that forefoot suspension element, just like a little gymnast vault. When you see the gymnasts run and vault off that vault and then, tumble through the air. We're not doing the tumbling part, but we go off the vault into the next stride. And these things act, in such a way on your foot as to allow you to run, and it feels, no kidding, I'm so happy to be able to say this, it feels very much like that belt that I so admired back in '97. It feels like that even on concrete. So you said your question from a little while ago was, what caused you to stick with this for 20 years? Okay. Well, now we're back. Now we're up to the point where I built a shoe and I ran it in that 2002 Chicago Marathon. And it's a crazy thing. I was building the shoe. I cooked the composites. I've got the shoe. I used a stock shoe, but I'm cutting it and modifying it. And I was working on a piece to assemble the shoe. I think it was like a Wednesday night, fairly late. My girlfriend, who I met in the running program, soon to be my wife, right? She's down in Florida for work, and I'm working, 11 o'clock at night, and I run my thumb right through the table saw.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're showing me a thumb with, looks like it's got some blue and stuff in your thumb.
That's blue shoe foam. That's my table saw tattoo. That's my table saw tattoo right there.
Your shoe is literally a part of you.
Blood, sweat, and tears. I had a big stripe of blood down my t-shirt, and I yanked the shirt off and wrap it around my hand, and I'm holding my arm over my head, and I call my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and I say, I just ran my thumb through the table saw, and she's like, okay, you sound a little like you might be in shock. I want you to go to the ER right now. And I did, and they cleaned it out and patched it up, and didn't really clean it out. I still have all that blue in there. But that was like that was a Wednesday night. The marathon was Sunday. I finished the shoe, gluing it together on Thursday night. And then Friday I unwrapped it, and I actually went around the block with it once. And that was it. And then Sunday, I'm at the marathon, 5 a.m. Sunday morning, with 30,000 other people, and I'm going to run the shoe. I'm going to run this shoe that I had, only run a couple blocks in before and had never existed until that week. So that was a bit of a leap of faith. I said a quick prayer, on the starting line, and took off with this shoe. I took off and I'm running, and it was, honest to goodness, it was just like the belt, that belt back in '97. I'm cruising along, and in a marathon like Chicago, it's crowded, 30,000 plus people. Now it's up to 45,000. And you don't want to have to move laterally through the crowd. It slows you down. You get jammed up. It kills your gait, your pace, your rhythm. What you want to be able to do is go up diagonally through the crowd. You want to be able to advance through the crowd. And I was able to. I always seemed to have gas pedal to do it. Okay. Always had the acceleration to do it. And I get to the halfway mark, and I'm looking at my watch and my little, pace sheet, right? And I'm like, I'm on a PR pace for me. I'm on a personal record for me. And I feel pretty good for the half. I'm going to pick it up a little bit, right? Let's do that. And I picked it up, and lo and behold, I finished the second half of that race faster than the first half. That's called a negative split, and recreational runners don't usually do that. You've got to be an elite runner, an advanced runner to do that. And my last mile was the fastest mile of all in the whole marathon. So clearly I had some gas left in the tank, but I was nervous about, would this shoe work for me? And it did. And so in that race, my 9 previous marathons, my PR in 9 previous marathons with the Cara pace group leader, exact same training every year, was 4 hours and 38 minutes. Okay. In 9 previous marathons, in that marathon, I cut 15 minutes off, 6%, and came in at 4:23, which is huge, which is a big deal. But even more, it was the experience of being able to fly through that marathon. I felt like one of those advanced runners that are always on the front of the pack, and here I am in the middle of the pack. I felt pretty good. And my thought was, okay, at that time, in that race, my thought was, wow, if I can just get this thing to market so that other people can have this experience that I just had, it'll change their lives.
Yeah. And I couldn't imagine
20 years later.
20 years later, yeah. And I couldn't imagine, running the marathon and literally every step is something that you created yourself. So that had to be super rewarding there, just in sheer thought that you had created the shoes that you were running on. So I think that's a really cool thing. And obviously as what has, I guess, kept your passion so strong is one, creating something so unique. And the other thing is to create something that the others can benefit from. So I do think that everyone with a cool story and everyone that's doing really great things normally has a great support system. You've talked about your wife, and I obviously I can hear the passion that you have behind creating this, and I'm sure that came with a lot of long days and long nights and getting excited about something, and maybe putting other things on the back burner, if you will. So how supportive has your family been through this whole process, and how inviting have they been for you to stay engaged for so long?
Wow, that's a cool question. So back when I ran my thumb through the table saw, I was dating my future wife. And it's kind of funny. When she first showed up in 2000 in my pace group, as one of the 30, 40 people, I think it was 40 for that year. One of the people in the pace group, I didn't know her or anything, but she much later told me a story that she would call her best girlfriend from college, and she went to Valpo here in Valparaiso. Mm-hmm. So she would call her best girlfriend, after a long Saturday, long run, and she would say, "Well, my fiance took us on a 16-mile run today," and her friend would say, "Have you even talked with him yet?" And she would say, "No, but I will," And he's my fiance. We're going to get married. And I tell you, she's kind of a force of nature, in her own way. And so we have been a pretty good little team. We've stuck together throughout her career changes and my career changes. And sometimes the shoe was on the front burner, but sometimes the shoe was on a side or a back burner while I had to do other work. And we have the 3 kids. Which, committing to a family is a big deal. And we've been together 15 years now, married. And so she's been, a real piece of the support system. And so have the kids. The kids love seeing all this shoe stuff, and they think it's cool. And all these interviews and, the stuff that's been happening lately has been fun. And my brother, who is an engineer, has always been a real resource for me, and some of my closest friends who are also engineers. I'll call them when I'm really down. I'll call my brother and my friends when I'm really down and say, I'm just really having a bad week, and this broke, or that didn't work out the way I wanted to. And my brother will, will sigh, and he'll look me straight in the eyes and he'll say, "Shut up and get back to work."
Yeah.
And you know, that kind of cheery camaraderie, you know, it's like, you're right, you know, just keep going, you know, and we'll dissect whatever happened. He'll say, "Look, this happened and that happened, and here's what you can learn from it," and keep going, you know.
Right.
And I've just, you know, I've really been blessed, I think, to have family and friends and people who, you know, can deal with having an inventor in their lives, you know, because you know, there's somebody told me once, I think it was I think it was Tim Leatherman, maybe. I saw him once at a trade show, the guy who invented the Leatherman collapsible pliers, you know. Somebody said, you know, that it's great if you get to pick your own career, pick your own job, what you want to do. He said, it's either great or a curse or both if your job picks you. And this is what I do. I'm always, ever since grade school, I've been sketching things to build or how something should work. It's really my DNA. It's who I am.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear, and good that you've had such a good support system. Obviously, that helps you excel. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any secret that I think people with a passion, regardless of what it is in, whether it's shoes or sports or, you know, anything else, just being able to see someone is passionate and following that passion, I think is just an attractive feature. So I'm sure that's why you were your wife's fiance before you even knew it. So, yeah, you know, obviously we've talked a lot about the shoe when it comes to running. So, I mean, is this just a true running shoe? Obviously, you know, people wear running shoes out to, you know, Walmart. I mean, should people that are interested in this shoe really be runners, and it's not really a casual daily shoe?
Well, okay, so that's also a good question. Some of the carbon shoes that are out there right now, they're pure, not even just runner shoes, they're pure elite racer shoes. Okay, I mean, not even for me, not even for most people. But this shoe, and we've got some testimonials on our website right now. This shoe works on a person even if they're standing still, so long as they're standing up. You know how when you're standing up, you normally kind of shift a little from side to side, you know, to relieve, you know, whatever little ache or to stretch yourself. Well, this shoe, even when you're standing on it, standing still, you can see the suspension quivering up and down. And that energy storage and release that it does, you know, 15 times a second or whatever, the more the shoe does that, the less your own muscles have to do that. Okay. So it's reducing fatigue, even if you're not moving. And some of the testimonials on our website aren't from runners. They're from people who have, you know, significant pain in their days, like, you know, ankle or knee replacement or hip or spine, lumbar, you know, spinal stenosis, what have you. And some of the people who've worn the shoe have gotten a lot of pain relief. And we can't really advertise that, you know, because we haven't done a study to prove it yet. But the anecdotal, you know, indications are that it's really good for people who have had some pain, you know. Yeah. And so, you know, I put this on little old grandmothers and you know, and people who, you know, were carrying way too much weight and trying to reduce weight, and, you know, getting them to go out and go around the block. And I really think, and there's a reason that, you know, one study we did when I was working with a larger company earlier on, one set of results we got back was that high BMI people, you know, which is body mass index, which means you're either very muscular or you're carrying a little extra weight or both. And lots of times, you know, you'll never see a heavy person who isn't also really strong, you know, because think about it, you know, you're carrying that extra weight, you're weight training 24/7. We've gotten feedback that, you know, those people really liked the shoe. And if you're carrying extra weight and you're trying to run, you know, or walk even like briskly around the block to lose weight, there's an internal sensation of shaking. And that internal sensation of shaking is unpleasant. It wants to tell you to sit down and take a load off, right? There's a word for that. It's called nociception. And the thing we found out was that our shoe was reducing that internal sensation of unease. And so one of our goals with this company, with this shoe, is to put it on people who would like to get up and go around the block, 3 or 4 times a week, or if they're going around the block, maybe go a mile, and help themselves to get out there and exercise and get fresh air and lose weight. Or if they've got, those physical mobility impairments that I mentioned earlier, help them to just get through their week with less pain.
Right.
So this could be good for a whole range of people, for everyone from grandma to your elite racer.
Yeah. Well, that's powerful for sure, to be able to, that, in the end of the day, I feel like that may be even more beneficial if you can create something that's causes, I guess, pain relief and helps running. Because I don't have any numbers and there's no studies here, but I'm pretty sure there's more older grandmas in pain than there are elite runners. So if you can get that market too, you're probably doing pretty good.
And one of our goals in getting this out there is to be able to do a chronic pain study. There's lots of ways to configure those, and we would really like to do that. And it's my dad was an iron worker. Okay, it's the people who have to go out on the job site all day long and look at this prototype. Your people on the audio can't see this, but it's a lightweight hiking boot with suspension in it.
Ooh, yeah.
And we did that as a prototype. So a lightweight hiking boot, we're only 1 or 2 steps away from a steel-toed work boot.
Yeah.
And so
that's cool.
we would like to build all of those.
All right. Well, the next question, I guess, is a harder one. So maybe one that you wish you would have said you didn't have more time for. But I was looking at another interview you did, and some of the comments under it. Obviously, there's always trolls. So what do you say to the detractors? What do you say to a comment that I had read that said, there's always these newfangled inventions that are kind of fly by night and it'll go away, and the normal running shoe that we all know will just be what we continue with. What do you say to that?
That's entirely understandable. I get it. As a guy who's been running since college for a long time, who's done 21 marathons and trained hundreds of runners to run, the running community is the focus of a ton of advertising and marketing. It's like, oh, this new shoe is going to change your life with this, you squeeze the tongue and it tightens around your foot and all kinds of goofy stuff. And it never does. Nothing's changed my life so far. And and I forget who it was, Hewlett or Packard, from Hewlett Packard. One of those guys said the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Okay. Inventors love that quote because it makes them sound noble, right? And capable. Well, in this particular case, I've, at this point, okay, so whoever said that on the comments, I totally get it. They're not going to believe it until they actually have a pair that they can put on and try themselves. And that's fine, okay? The people who hear this, what we're talking about, the people who've seen our website, handshoes.com, the people who've read some of the testimonials, there's a picture of me and my daughter when she was, I think, 3 on there, holding a pair of shoes, a pair of early prototypes. And, she's 14 now and asking to drive my car. It's been a while, and the people who, catch this vision right off the bat, they're the people who are going to buy it now. Mm-hmm. And when they buy it now, okay, we're going to use, that revenue to not only build their shoes, we're going to build more shoes so that the guy who said, things come and go, he can order a pair and try it out for himself and then find out. He can find out that, hey, it actually is different. And at this point, I've run 10 marathons in various versions of this shoe. and I put it on lots and lots of wear testers and gotten their feedback and interviewed them. And I'm really convinced it's going to have a big, useful future for people. So everyone who's skeptical right now, I don't blame them one little bit. I've been skeptical of goofy new products myself.
So, I mean, this is probably something that you're going to release on Kickstarter. May not be able to answer now, or maybe you can, but I know it's a question that people are naturally going to have. I mean, what kind of price point are people looking at to get involved in this type of shoe?
Okay, so part of that is, what it is, and part of it is, what we need to be able to make, to build it. A carbon shoe, like some of those other carbon shoes that are out there right now, generally go for about $250, and the high-end non-carbon shoes are pushing 200, sometimes over that. Mm-hmm. We're calling the retail price of this shoe, just so we can nail down that slot. We're calling the retail price of this thing $300. Okay, but the Kickstarter, especially for the early bird sales, is going to start at, I think they're talking about, our marketing guys are going to start at under 200. And then it's going to go, 210, 215, 230, 40, 50, in there. And then they're going to do like a pair of shoes for couples, at a bit of a discount. There's all kinds of, and that's the way Kickstarter works. There's tiers all over the place for whatever you want to do.
Right.
But, generally the quicker the better on the pricing.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like the natural thing people would think is, whoa, that sounds like a lot. But I'll tell you, if you look at it in two ways, one, my brother's actually into running. I don't really know too much about it. He definitely gets all into it and tells me all about it. But he got super excited when he was able to get some running shoe for like $200. So I know it's definitely an expensive market for sure. And then also, if you're thinking about how much people pay for pain management shoes, on the other end of the spectrum, I have a grandmother who buys, $400 shoes that help her stability. So if you think about that kind of thing, that's a pretty good price point, really.
Well, and here's the big kicker. Okay, here's the big kicker, especially if you're a runner. Running shoes are just like bananas. Okay.
Okay.
I'll explain. I'll explain how. When you first get a banana, okay, it's a little green from the supermarket, and you can peel it, and it's edible. It's not the most delicious thing you ever had, but you can eat it. And that's how the running shoe is. When you first put it on, it's a little too stiff. It needs a little breaking in, a few miles. Well, then there's a few days after you've gotten your bananas, they're kind of a nice, bright, mellow yellow, right? And they're perfect, and they're tasty and delicious. And that's the middle life of a shoe, of a running shoe. And they're good, okay? It's good. You're rolling out the miles in the sunshine and loving life, right? Life is good. Well, then your bananas get a few little brown spots on them, and they're still pretty good. They're just a little soft on the edges, but they're okay. Well, that's your running shoe starting to take what's called a compression set. The foam starts flattening out, okay, internally to the foam structure. But it's still okay. It's okay. Well, then your banana's got big old black spots on it, and it's mushy, and now you're talking banana bread, okay? Well, with your running shoes, they could still look fine. They could still look fine, but be completely worn out in the midsole. And once you hit about 400 miles in a running shoe, it will actually hurt you. For me, if I get close to 400 miles, my knees start twinging. That the shoe is really sacked out, and I got to go get new shoes, even though they look good. Well, I have different prototypes, versions of these shoes that I have personally logged and put over 800 miles on. Okay. So if it's a $250 shoe, but I'm able to get, for example, I'm not promising this to everybody, because, I've seen people who can grind through a shoe in 200 miles, but if it's a $250 shoe and you happen to get 800 miles out of it, Well, that's double the life of a normal shoe. That's two $125 shoes, which is almost cheap in that marketplace.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Obviously, if it depreciates slower, then that just makes every mile cheaper. So that makes
Yeah.
sense. So where can people let's say they didn't get in on this Kickstarter, they're listening to this 6 months from now, because obviously it's here for the rest of time. How can they maybe look into this, and how can they connect with your shoes?
Well, okay, so we're at, just like you're holding up my hand here, we're at Hann, Hann, shoes, that's HOES.com, handshoes.com. The link will direct you to the Kickstarter. After the Kickstarter, depending on how many extra shoes we order, okay, we may even be able to start up e-commerce, and you can just go to our website and order a pair of shoes.
Very good.
That would be awesome. And then have them a couple days later instead of 6 months later.
Yeah, no, that is really cool. I'll tell you, it's been a pleasure. We certainly got more into the dynamics of shoes than I have ever known in my life, but I like it. That's why I do this, is to, be able to talk to different people and learn things. So I think that we all learned something. So it was a pleasure to speak with you. I love the passion that you have behind it. It shows, and I think that's why it's going to be successful. So again, thanks for being here. Make sure that people go to handshoes.com or the Kickstarter, and hopefully we'll see. Obviously, let's not shoot for 45,000, but we see a couple hundred people in a Chicago Marathon in hand shoes at some point.
That would be awesome. That would really be great. Thank you so much, Jackson, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You have a great one. And that was my interview with Lenn Hann. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot about running, a lot about inventing, and just about finding something that you're passionate about and just running with it. I think that's the big thing with Lenn. He found this shoe and something that he wanted to create just off of seeing the moving walkway and how it felt. And he knew that would be something that could help and benefit a lot of people. So he spent the next 20 years creating it. I think that's just a powerful thing. He's a really cool guy. I think that shows in the interview. Really enjoyed speaking with him. I definitely tell you, go check out that shoe if it's something that you're even remotely interested. Hann Shoes. It's currently still on Kickstarter. If you're listening to this, when it's posted, which is early February, still there. If not, check out his website that he mentioned. And, if it's something you're interested in, great. If it's not, I hope you took a lot from his story and just, the creative spirit and the inventor spirit. I'm glad you're here. I appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week. Definitely a special one next week. They're all really awesome, but I'm really proud of next week's interview. So catch you then. Take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time, where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.